It was a Tuesday, which already meant nothing good could happen. Tuesdays had a talent for being forgettable in the worst ways. Lost keys, burnt toast, spilled coffee on paperwork that wasn't even important enough to matter. So when my living room air split open like a bad seam on a cheap pair of jeans, I was mid-sip of a lukewarm instant coffee, and my first thought, embarrassingly, was that I had left the microwave door open too long. The tear widened, its edges shimmering with a color that didn't seem to fit into the visible spectrum. A sort of violet green, painful to look at, but impossible to turn away from. A low hum filled the room, vibrating the junk mail on the coffee table and setting off my neighbor's dog into a fresh fit of barking. I should have run. I should have screamed. Instead, I sat there like a poorly coded NPC, coffee cup frozen halfway to my mouth, and stared. And then, through the tear, she stepped. She wore an outfit that could best be described as what would happen if a toga, a spacesuit, and a crystal chandelier had a very enthusiastic child together. Her hair, a cascade of silver, shot through with strands of what looked suspiciously like stardust, floated slightly as if underwater. Her skin was human enough, but shimmered subtly under the dim lighting of my apartment, like a pearl given life, and the ears, long, gracefully tapering, with a faint iridescent glow at their edges, twitched in response to every sound, every breath I took. I knew those ears. Somehow, against all logic and reason, I knew them. "Hi, Evan," she said, her voice a warm, musical lilt that pulled a memory straight out of the dusty archives of my childhood. "Miss me?" I did what any sensible adult in my situation would do. I dropped my coffee mug. It hit the floor with a hollow thunk, miraculously avoiding shattering, and splattered brown sludge across my socks. I glanced down at the mess, then back up at her, mouth flapping like a fish thrown onto a boat deck. "Lyra," I croaked, my voice about 3 octaves higher than usual. She grinned, flashing teeth just a little too sharp to be comfortable. "In the flesh. Well, technically a complex biosynthetic symbiotic interface, but close enough." I blinked. You're here. Clearly. And you have ears now." "Had them the whole time," she said, tilting her head cheekily. "You just weren't paying attention." Somewhere in the depths of my mind, gears ground against one another, trying to process the collision between memory and present reality. Lyra, my imaginary friend. My secret buddy from the summers I spent exploring the woods behind my house, building forts out of sticks and arguing about the best kind of sandwich. Except she hadn't been imaginary, had she? Lyra stepped forward, boots clicking softly on the floorboards, and inspected my living room with an expression hovering between horror and amusement. Her gaze landed on the overflowing laundry basket, the scattered energy drink cans, the patch of carpet suspiciously stained with what was probably soy sauce. "Nice place," she said, poking a pizza box with a delicate glowing finger. "Very post-apocalyptic chic. I like it. Adds authenticity." I opened my mouth to protest, then realized she wasn't wrong, and shut it again. "So," I said, grasping desperately for normalcy, "what brings you to my humble dump?" She grinned again, and this time there was a glint of something mischievous in her violet-green eyes. "Oh, nothing much. Just a tiny thing. Thought I'd drop by to tell you, I'm a queen now." There was a silence so heavy it practically had its own gravitational field. The neighbor's dog barked once, then whimpered into submission. "You're a queen?" I echoed, because my brain had clearly entered a feedback loop. "Yep." She twirled, her sparkly, nonsensical outfit catching the overhead light in a prism of colors. "Crowned, revered, worshipped, all that good stuff. My people really like long ears, turns out. Big political advantage." "Your people," I said slowly, feeling my sanity leaking out through my ears like helium from a punctured balloon. "As in, alien people." Lyra winked. "Give the man a prize." I stumbled backward onto the couch, missing the cushions entirely and landing with an undignified grunt on the floor. Lyra leaned over me, upside down from my perspective, her long ears dangling and swaying. You always were a little dramatic, she said cheerfully. You just ripped open the fabric of reality in my living room. I shouted from the floor. She shrugged. Pfft, small tear, self-repairing. Happens all the time. Last week I accidentally opened one in the Royal Gardens and a dozen quantum geese got loose. They're still trying to uncause the pond. Quantum geese. They honk in probability waves, she said solemnly. There was a long pause while I tried and failed to wrap my mind around that particular horror. Anyway, Lyra said, clapping her hands once, the sound resonating weirdly against the walls. We have a lot to catch up on. You're probably wondering why I'm here after all this time. I struggled upright and sat on the edge of the couch, knees bouncing with nervous energy. Wondering doesn't begin to cover it. Lyra perched cross-legged on the coffee table, somehow without disturbing the precarious stack of unopened mail. She rested her chin on one hand and studied me with eyes that still, somehow, looked like the girl who used to race me to the top of the creek hill, who used to steal my peanut butter sandwiches and leave me shiny rocks as payment. I missed you, she said simply. That hit harder than anything else, harder than the magical portal, the queen revelation, even the quantum geese. I missed you too, I said, my voice cracking. And just like that, the years between us melted away, and I wasn't a worn-down engineer living in a messy apartment. I was just Evan again, sitting across from Lyra, the impossible girl who had once made the woods behind my house feel like the entire universe. So, I said after a moment, what now? You come to Earth to hang out, tour the tourist traps, grab a cheeseburger? Lyra's grin turned sly. Sort of, but there's a little problem. Of course there is. You see, she said, stretching languidly, technically, I'm supposed to be overseeing the grand interstellar convergence negotiations right now. That sounds important. It is, very. Like, if it goes badly, whole sectors of space could end up in bureaucratic cold wars that last millennia important. I groaned, burying my face in my hands. And you're here because, she said brightly, I needed a break. And I thought, hey, who better to visit than my favorite human? You ditched galactic diplomacy to crash on my couch. She nodded enthusiastically. And eat pizza, and maybe play some of that ridiculous racing game you used to love. I looked at her, this absurd, shimmering, galaxy queen alien woman sitting barefoot on my coffee table, and laughed. A ragged, half-hysterical sound that quickly turned into genuine amusement. You are the worst monarch in the universe, I said. Flattery will get you nowhere, commoner, Lyra sniffed, tossing her hair dramatically. I shook my head, still laughing, and stood up. Fine, but if the universe collapses because you needed a pizza break, I'm telling everyone it was your fault. Deal, she said, offering her hand. I took it, feeling the faint pulse of starfire under her skin, and grinned. Maybe Tuesdays weren't so bad after all. It was the next morning, though I wouldn't have known it from the lighting. My apartment didn't get much natural sunlight, but now it didn't seem to get any at all. The windows had fogged over from the inside, displaying a shifting metallic sheen like someone had turned them into mood rings, reacting to an existential crisis. I poked one with my finger. It beeped and flashed a shade of angry chartreuse. I quickly withdrew. That's new, I muttered, stepping away. Are the windows supposed to judge me now? From the kitchen came the clinking of dishes and the unmistakable hum of someone who didn't fully understand Earth's version of melody, but was committing to it anyway. Lyra stood at the stove, wearing my bathrobe backwards like a ceremonial cloak, flipping pancakes with what appeared to be a repurposed alien data disk. The stove was on, at least, and I hadn't yet smelled anything catching fire, so that counted as a win. I rewired your heat coil, she said brightly as I entered. It now runs on localized microfusion, so your pancakes are cooked via stable hydrogen reactions. Very efficient. Might also have slightly ionized the air in your kitchen. If your eggs taste like electricity, that's why. Lyra, I said, rubbing my eyes, you cannot just upgrade my appliances without asking. Relax, she said, handing me a plate with what looked like perfectly cooked pancakes, albeit faintly glowing. Your toaster's next. I'm thinking gravity-fed thermal suspension system. Number, absolutely not. She winked, which was not a good sign. Lyra winked the way cats stare at vases just before knocking them off shelves. We ate in silence for a bit. The pancakes were shockingly good. A little ozone-y, but fluffy and warm, and just the right amount of crisp on the edges. I didn't want to encourage her, so I kept my praise internal. Eventually, I couldn't hold the questions back anymore. "So, you're a queen now," I said mid-bite. "How exactly does that happen? Is it like Game of Thrones up there, or did you win a cosmic raffle?" Lyra tapped her fork against her plate thoughtfully. "Bit of both, really. Altheran's succession is weird. Half meritocracy, half genetic destiny, half interpretive dance. That's three halves. You should see our math. It's spectacularly inefficient." I chuckled despite myself. "Seriously, though." Lyra's expression sobered slightly, though a mischievous glint lingered in her eye. "When I left Earth, I was taken back to Althera. My mother, the former queen, had disappeared during a diplomatic visit to the Lethane Nebula. Big scandal, left a power vacuum the size of Jupiter. I was still young, untrained, a total unknown, but apparently I had the ears for it. That's really all it takes?" "Oh, not just ears," she said, poking her pancake. "There were trials, a series of ancient challenges meant to test a candidate's worthiness. Combat, diplomacy, psychological resilience, and a final rite known as the test of voices. That sounds ominous. It's mostly yelling at an ancestral crystal until it yells back. Surprisingly cathartic." I gave her a long look. "So you survived interstellar court politics, shouted at a rock, and got crowned queen?" "Basically." I leaned back, letting that sink in. The girl who once convinced me to eat dandelions as a secret Earth immunity ritual was now the ruler of an alien empire. She watched me with a sly smile, clearly enjoying my brain short-circuiting. "Okay," I said slowly, "but why come back? Why now?" Her smile faded, and she looked down at her glowing fork. "Because things are getting complicated. There are factions forming, people questioning the legitimacy of the throne, and I've been so busy proving myself as queen that I forgot what it felt like to just be. You know?" I nodded, though I didn't. Not really, but I knew what it was like to be tired, to feel unmoored. "I needed someone who remembers me before all of this," she continued. "Someone who doesn't care about protocol or power or planetary alliances." "Well, congratulations," I said, gesturing around the cluttered kitchen. "You found the most protocol-less person on Earth." Her grin returned. "Exactly." Before I could respond, a strange shimmer pulsed through the air. My ceiling flickered. Actually flickered, like the projection of a faulty hologram. Lyra looked up sharply, the relaxed expression dropping from her face. "Oh no," she muttered. "Please tell me that's normal." "It's not." The ceiling shimmered again, and with a snap like a light bulb imploding, a group of three humanoid figures phased into view above the kitchen table. They were tall, cloaked in robes that seemed to be made of negative space, and each had a different geometric shape floating just above their heads. A cube, a spiral, and what looked like a Mobius strip doing yoga. "Queen Lyra of House Velnar," the center one intoned. Its voice was filtered and distorted, like someone talking through a whirlpool. "You are in violation of Interstellar Statute 7-X994, unauthorized planar transit during high convergence periods." Lyra rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. "Oh, great, the triad." The left figure, Spiral, floated slightly higher. "You are summoned back to Althera, immediately." "I'm on sabbatical," Lyra snapped. "You know the rules. 1 galactic week of uninterrupted downtime per solar year. Look it up. You departed without designating a proxy. I left my cat in charge. She is not legally recognized under Altheran law." "She's legally terrifying," Lyra muttered. "That should count." Evan, thoroughly lost and still holding a syrup-covered fork, raised a tentative hand. "Hi, Earth guy here. Could someone explain what's happening before my ceiling explodes again?" All three figures turned to look at me in perfect unison. I froze, suddenly feeling like an ant caught under a magnifying glass held by particularly judgmental gods. "Unauthorized witness," Cube said. "Civilian non-threat. Spiral added. Mobius tilted ever so slightly. Neutral anomaly. Hey, I said, offended. Neutral anomaly? That's worse than civilian non-threat. Lyra stepped protectively in front of me. He's under my shield, Royal Exemption Clause 319. The triad flickered. They clearly didn't like that. This breach, Cube said slowly, has consequences. You'll survive, Lyra said sweetly, and then snapped her fingers. With a sudden pulse of light, the three figures vanished in a flash of spatial compression, leaving behind the smell of ozone and a faint echo of intergalactic disappointment. I stared at the spot where they'd stood, then at Lyra. So, that's your management team? Middle management, she said, rolling her shoulders. The worst kind. There was silence. Then I said, do they always just phase in like that? Because next time I'd like a bit more warning. Maybe a theme song, or flashing lights. I'll put in a request. I stood there in my electrified kitchen, full of glowing pancakes and bureaucratic threats from space, and laughed. I couldn't help it. I laughed so hard I had to lean against the counter. Lyra joined in, her laughter echoing with stardust and memory. Outside, the sky turned an iridescent teal, and somewhere far above, the universe made room for two very old friends who had no idea what they were doing. The day after the pancake incident, and the spontaneous visit from what I now affectionately referred to as the Space DMV, started surprisingly normal. The windows had stopped flashing accusatory colors, the ceiling returned to its default peeling beige, and I dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, my life would wobble back toward something resembling sanity. This hope lasted exactly 17 minutes. At 8:43 a.m., just as I was contemplating whether I could call a single pancake breakfast meal prepping, my apartment shook with a deep, sonorous boom, like God had dropped his phone upstairs. I sprinted to the living room, heart hammering. Lyra was already there, arms crossed, tapping one bare foot on the floor with theatrical annoyance. Floating in front of her, in my living room, mind you, was a spaceship. Not a full-sized one, thank cosmic mercy. More like a personal craft, roughly the size of a minivan, hovering just inches above the carpet. It hummed faintly, the way I imagined a satisfied mechanical cat would, and its sleek surface reflected the cluttered chaos of my apartment in a disturbingly judgmental way. You got a delivery? I asked weakly. It's my emergency extraction pod, Lyra said, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. They must have sent it after my delightful chat with the triad yesterday. Extraction, I repeated, voice cracking. As in they want to yank you back to your planet? She shrugged. Or vaporize me. It depends on who's driving. I laughed nervously, then realized she wasn't joking. You think they'd really? Nah, she said, patting the ship's hull like an affectionate but badly behaved pet. They'd have to fill out about 17,000 forms first. Altheran bureaucracy is worse than your DMV by a factor of 12. Good to know, I said, wiping sweat from my brow. So what's the plan? She stepped back and grinned. We're stealing it. I stared. Stealing your own spaceship? Yep. I feel like that's redundant. Redundantly awesome, she said, flashing her two sharp teeth. Now grab your coat. We're going on a field trip. I hesitated. Where exactly are we going? Somewhere safe, she said breezily. Trust me. Historically, trusting Lyra had led to exactly 1,000% chaos. It had also once led to discovering a secret underground lake populated by bioluminescent frogs. So on balance, I figured it was worth the risk. Flying a spacecraft is nothing like the movies. First of all, there were no seats. Instead, the inside of the pod was a gravity-controlled field. You basically floated wherever you wanted, clinging to handholds or, in my case, flailing wildly like a man stuck in an invisible tumble dryer. Lyra moved like she was born for it, gliding smoothly across the cabin, tapping holographic controls that bloomed into existence at her fingertips. She wore a mischievous little smile the entire time, like a kid who knew exactly where the cookie jar was hidden. Can't we get seat belts? I yelped, spinning slowly in midair. Gravity cushions, she said. Way safer. Just don't sneeze too hard or you might rebound into the wall. Great. I pinwheeled my arms, caught a grip handle, and pulled myself upright, floating in what I hoped was a dignified manner. Judging by Lyra's snort of laughter, it wasn't. Outside the pod, the air shimmered, and then, with a feeling like being squeezed through a very determined toothpaste tube, we were somewhere else. The landscape unfurled around us, a vast glittering desert under a sky the color of melted sapphires. Strange, towering formations of crystal rose from the sand like frozen lightning strikes, refracting light in wild, impossible colors. In the distance, a massive structure floated several meters off the ground. A building made entirely of mirrored surfaces, shifting and rotating slowly, as if it were solving a puzzle only it understood. "Where are we?" I managed to gasp, my stomach doing cartwheels. "Welcome to the archive," Lyra said, sounding almost reverent. "The biggest library in the quadrant." I blinked. "You brought me to a library?" "Not just any library. The archive stores every event, every memory, every potential future across 1,000 worlds. It's like Wikipedia and quantum theory had a very well-organized baby." We floated the pod down toward the ground, where a landing platform extended itself like a tongue tasting the air. As we touched down, gravity reasserted itself gently, and I staggered onto solid ground, grateful for a floor that didn't try to murder me. Standing at the entrance to the archive was a figure, or at least what I assumed was one. It had a vaguely humanoid outline, but was made entirely of shifting letters and symbols, swirling and rearranging constantly like an uncooperative screensaver. It spoke without a mouth, its voice 1,000 languages layered atop each other, somehow resolving into perfect English in my brain. "Welcome, Queen Lyra of Velnar. Welcome, designated companion Evan Reed." I frowned. "Designated companion?" Lyra shrugged. "Would you prefer earthly minion?" "I'll take companion, thanks." The archive entity gestured, or rather its entire form sort of bowed in suggestion, and the mirrored doors peeled open, revealing a corridor lined with holographic displays, each one showing glimpses of different worlds. Forests of gas, oceans of flame, cities made of light and sound. Lyra turned to me, suddenly serious. "In here we can hide. Even the triad won't breach archive neutrality." "Hide from what?" She hesitated, and in that heartbeat of silence, the jovial facade cracked just a little. "From whoever's really after me," she said quietly. I swallowed. "You mean it's not just your space HR department? If it were, I'd just bribe them with pastries and interdimensional spa vouchers. No, Evan, this is bigger. Someone doesn't just want me off the throne. They want me erased." The weight of her words hung in the air like a brewing storm. I looked at Lyra, really looked at her, and saw not just the girl who used to shove me into mud puddles for fun, but the queen who now carried an entire world's future on her narrow shoulders. And despite myself, despite the surreal horror of it all, I cracked a grin. "So," I said, nudging her arm, "still think sneaking into a library is lame?" Lyra smiled back, fierce and brilliant. "Not when it's a library that could save the universe," she said. We stepped inside together as the mirrored doors sealed behind us with a soft click, locking out the dangers of the universe for just a little while longer. The inside of the archive smelled like old paper, polished metal, and cotton candy? I wasn't sure how a building composed entirely of interdimensional mirrors and quantum memory banks managed to smell like a county fair, but I decided not to question it too hard. Stranger things had happened in the last 48 hours, like my best friend from childhood crashing back into my life as a galactic queen. The hallway unfolded before us, endless and dizzying. It didn't just stretch forward. It bent sideways, looped upward, spiraled in directions my brain politely refused to acknowledge. As we walked, the walls shifted, rearranging themselves like they were trying to predict our next move. "Is it just me?" I whispered. "Or is the building breathing?" Lyra grinned. "The archive is semi-sentient. It reacts to intention. Think of it like a massive, grumpy butler with a library card." As if on cue, a section of the wall ahead rippled and split open with a wet, slightly offended noise. Beyond it was a vast chamber, domed and glittering, filled with row after row of floating data crystals, tiny shards of light, each spinning and whispering fragments of forgotten worlds. In the center of the room floated a platform, circular and faintly humming, with a control panel hovering over it like a priest performing a delicate ritual. Lyra strode toward it with the confidence of someone who had clearly broken into sacred places before. I hung back, glancing nervously at the crystals. Every so often one would drift a little closer, and I'd catch glimpses of bizarre, dreamlike scenes inside them. Mountains floating upside down, cities where the rain fell in slow motion, giant mechanical turtles carrying civilizations on their backs. One crystal buzzed particularly close. Inside, a very serious-looking duck in a tiny cape was presiding over a courtroom of lizards. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and blinked again. Nope. Still there. Lyra noticed and laughed. That's a probability thread. One potential universe where ducks evolved into sentient legal authorities. I want to live there, I said immediately. You might be underqualified, she teased. Their bar exam involves swimming through molten algae. I've survived worse. She chuckled, tapping a sequence into the control panel. Instantly, the air around us shifted, and a massive holographic map bloomed into existence. It showed not just stars and planets, but layered flows of data, like rivers of time and possibility weaving through the galaxy. I stared up, feeling very small and very, very impressed. This, Lyra said, gesturing grandly, is every recorded history, every potential history, and every could-have-been future stored by the archive. Somewhere in here is the answer to who's after me. That's a lot to sort through, I said, my voice tiny. She winked. Good thing we've got a cheat code. With a flick of her wrist, Lyra pulled a slim, silver rod from a hidden pocket in her jacket. It pulsed once, and the map immediately began reconfiguring itself, narrowing down to a handful of flickering points. What's that? I asked. Royal Archive key. It's keyed to my DNA and about 17 layers of identity encryption. Basically, it means the archive listens to me even when it's feeling surly. I nodded. So Queen Perks. Got it. Exactly, she said, scanning the points. Now, where are you, you sneaky little coup-plotting weasel? Before I could ask who exactly we were hunting, a new voice interrupted. Queen Lyra Vailnar, it drawled, with the oily smugness of someone who had definitely practiced their villainous monologue in a mirror. We spun around. Standing in the entrance was a tall figure clad in dark green armor that shimmered with embedded stardust. His long, pointed ears, even longer than Lyra's, twitched with amusement, and a thin smile curled on his lips. Lord Vike, Lyra said, her tone colder than the vacuum of space. You remember me, he said, mock surprised. I'm touched, truly. I edged closer to Lyra and whispered, Friend of yours? More like ex-co-worker, she muttered back. The kind that steals your stapler and tries to frame you for planetary embezzlement. Lord Vake stepped closer, boots clicking ominously on the crystal floor. Behind him, a cadre of equally well-dressed but distinctly less impressive henchmen fanned out, each armed with sleek pulse rifles. I came to offer you a deal, Vake said smoothly. Come back to Althera, abdicate quietly, and I promise your quaint little friend here won't end up as atmospheric debris. Wow, I said dryly. Chivalry really is dead. Vake ignored me, focusing solely on Lyra. Think about it, Your Majesty. The throne is wasted on you. You were always too sentimental. Lyra's eyes hardened. Sentiment is not a weakness. It's the only reason you're still breathing. He laughed, low and cruel. That's adorable, but it's time to stop playing queen. The henchmen raised their weapons. I tensed, heart hammering. My survival instinct screamed that this was the part where we got zapped into atomic confetti. But Lyra just smiled. The slow, dangerous smile of someone who knew exactly how badly you were about to regret your life choices. You know, she said sweetly, I upgraded the archive's security protocols last time I visited. Vake frowned. What? At that moment, the air around us exploded into motion. The crystals hovering nearby sprang to life, weaving themselves into barriers of blinding light. Holographic tendrils lashed out, yanking rifles from henchmen's hands and flinging them into walls with bone-rattling thuds. The platform beneath Lyra flared, lifting us both into the air like a rising elevator of vengeance. Vike roared, trying to summon energy blades from his gauntlets. But the archive wasn't having it. A swarm of duck judge probability constructs descended on him, pecking and quacking furiously. I gaped. Is that the duck courtroom? Lyra beamed. Justice is served. We soared higher, threading through spiraling corridors as the archive itself shifted to shield us. Behind us, Vike's furious howls echoed, cut off one by walls slamming shut. Finally, we tumbled out into a new chamber. Smaller, quieter, but just as breathtaking. Here, a single crystal hovered in the center, pulsing with slow, deliberate light. Lyra reached for it carefully. This, she said, her voice reverent, is what they're after, not just me. I stared. Inside the crystal was a map, not of a place, but of a time. A potential timeline where Althera wasn't just a single world, but an empire spanning galaxies. And in that empire, there was no Lyra, only Vike. Realization hit me like a comet. He wants to erase you from the archive, I said, horrified. Rewrite history so you never ruled. Exactly, she said, closing her fingers around the crystal. It melted into her palm, absorbed like a promise. But not if we get there first. As we bolted deeper into the archive's living, shifting corridors, I realized two things. One, I was very, very much out of my depth. And two, I wouldn't have missed this for anything in the universe. Running through a sentient library while carrying the fate of a monarchy, and by extension, possibly a whole quadrant, wasn't exactly how I thought my Wednesday would go. Most Wednesdays involved arguing with my toaster or losing socks to whatever black hole lurked in my dryer. Not this high-speed, interdimensional game of keep away. Lyra led the charge, the stolen crystal still pulsing faintly in her hand. The archive kept reshaping itself around us, doors sprouting where walls had been, staircases folding up into ramps, even one very polite slide that deposited us into a sprawling, low-gravity chamber filled with orbs that floated like soap bubbles, each one containing a pocket of another time. As I bounced awkwardly off a bubble showing some ancient battle involving very aggressive-looking hedgehogs in exosuits, Lyra grabbed my wrist and pulled me upright. We're almost to the memory core, she said between panting breaths. Once we reach it, we can secure the crystal. And by secure, I huffed, trying to keep up. You mean hide it? I mean, she said, flashing a mischievous grin, we're going to rewrite a few rules. Before I could question the wisdom of letting someone who once failed a baking soda volcano project tamper with quantum reality, the walls ahead rippled and Vake reappeared, looking significantly worse for wear. His once pristine armor was scuffed and dripping with something that looked suspiciously like holographic duck feathers. End of the line, he snarled, voice cracking with rage. Lyra didn't even slow down. She pulled a small circular device from her jacket and tossed it over her shoulder. It hit the floor, beeped once, and exploded into a writhing mass of sticky, neon blue tendrils that yanked Vake and his henchmen off their feet, like toddlers trapped in a ball pit. Sticky grenades, she called cheerfully over her shoulder. Best thing I ever shoplifted. You stole that? I gasped. Technically, she said, winking, I borrowed it indefinitely. We sprinted through a final shimmering archway, and suddenly the chaos fell away. The memory core was a cavernous, impossibly still space. Columns of translucent data rose like ancient trees, their roots woven deep into the archive's living floor. In the center, a pedestal waited, simple, unadorned, humming with power that made my hair stand on end. Lyra approached cautiously, the crystal in her hand glowing brighter as we neared the pedestal. This is it, she whispered. Once I slot the crystal in, it'll rewrite the archive's record. Lock my existence into every timeline so Vake can't erase me. I nodded, heart pounding. Do it. She hesitated. What's wrong? Lyra turned to me, her eyes unusually serious. If I do this, if I anchor myself to the timelines, I'm stuck. No more running, no more hiding. I become Queen Lyra of Velnar permanently. I blinked. Weren't you already queen? Technically, yes, she said, fiddling with the crystal. But I never really accepted it. I always figured someday I could walk away, go back to being just Lyra, your weird, overly competitive friend who could drink her weight in neon slushies. I tried to smile, but the lump in my throat made it hard. You're still her, I said. You'll always be her. Lyra gave me a long, searching look. Then, with a small, fierce nod, she stepped forward and pressed the crystal into the pedestal. The change was immediate. The entire room shuddered and the columns of data flared brilliant white. I stumbled back as reality itself seemed to warp. Not violently, but like a deep, resonant note thrumming through the universe. The light swirled around Lyra, lifting her hair, wrapping her in shimmering strands that looked suspiciously like algebra made visible. For one terrifying second, I thought she might dissolve, becoming one with the archive forever. Instead, the light dimmed, and Lyra straightened, breathing hard but smiling. A real, triumphant smile that lit up her whole face. "It's done," she said, voice hoarse but steady. "I'm real. Everywhere." A slow, sarcastic clap interrupted our moment. Vike, having somehow escaped the sticky grenade, staggered into the room. He looked like he'd lost a fight with a rogue vacuum cleaner, but he was still grinning. "Touching," he sneered, "but you forgot something." Behind him, a dark rift began to open, a swirling maw of nothingness that sucked the light from the air. It pulsed hungrily, and the memory columns nearest to it shivered and cracked. "What the hell is that?" I yelped, backing away. "Reality shredder," Lyra said grimly. "Illegal in 17 star systems." "Only 17, I said faintly. Vake laughed, throwing his arms wide. "If I can't erase you from the archive, I'll erase the archive itself." This felt like a slight overreaction. Lyra grabbed my hand. "New plan, run!" "No argument here." We bolted as the rift widened, tearing at the fabric of the archive. Pages of memory floated through the air like shredded dreams, and the very ground beneath us cracked and rippled like disturbed water. "Tell me you have another sticky grenade," I shouted. "Fresh out," she yelled back. The doorway we'd entered through had collapsed, so we veered sideways, skidding down a corridor that hadn't existed 30 seconds ago. The archive, to its credit, seemed to be doing its best to help. Pathways open for us, walls folding out of the way like courteous doormen. At one point, we tumbled through a gravity-inverted chamber, where up was down and left was regret. I lost my footing, flailed like an uncoordinated octopus, and slammed into a wall. "How do you people live like this?" I groaned. Lyra grinned, grabbing my hand again. "Mostly through stubbornness and caffeine." Behind us, the rift howled louder, gaining on us. "There!" Lyra pointed to a bright, swirling portal at the far end of the collapsing hallway. "A portal to where?" "Anywhere but here. Good enough for me." We sprinted the last few meters, the pull of the rift nearly tearing us backward. With a final, desperate leap, we dove through the portal, and the universe flipped inside out. For one weightless, timeless moment, we were nowhere. No up, no down, no sense of anything but a wild, exhilarating freedom. Then gravity returned with a rude shove, and we crash-landed onto something soft and strangely familiar. Grass. I sat up, gasping, and looked around. We were back on Earth, in the field behind my apartment complex, where Lyra and I had once spent entire summers building forts and pretending to be starship captains. Lyra lay sprawled beside me, laughing breathlessly at the sky. "We made it," she said, voice full of wonder. "And Vake?" I asked. She shrugged. "If the archive survives, they'll take care of him. If not—" She trailed off, but there was a note of grim satisfaction in her smile. I leaned back, staring up at the stars just beginning to peek through the twilight. "You know," I said, "when you said you wanted to hang out again after all these years, I thought maybe coffee, not an intergalactic heist." Lyra chuckled. "Coffee's next." "Good," I said, "but I'm picking the place. Last time you chose, we ended up in a diner run by sentient slugs. They made great pancakes," she said, mock-offended. "Only if you liked them very slimy." We laughed together, the sound rising into the night like a promise that no matter how many worlds tried to rewrite us, some things, some friendships, were unbreakable. The next morning, I woke to the unmistakable sound of someone trying, and failing to operate my coffee machine. It whirred, sputtered, and made a noise suspiciously like a dying accordion. Bleary-eyed, I stumbled into the kitchen to find Lyra crouched over the device, poking it with a suspiciously sharp stick. "I don't think stabbing it will make it brew faster," I said, scratching my head. Lyra glanced up, looking both guilty and unrepentant. "On Althera, coffee is brewed using pressurized sonic waves. I thought maybe your machine would appreciate a little motivation." "You're motivating it into an early retirement," I said, gently confiscating the stick, which turned out to be a miniature plasma dagger. "No weapons before caffeine." She grinned, her long ears twitching slightly with amusement. "I see Earth still has some ancient and barbaric customs." I managed to get the machine working through the usual sacred ritual of unplugging it, cursing at it, and plugging it back in. As it gurgled to life, filling the tiny kitchen with the smell of salvation, I leaned against the counter and looked her over. She was wearing a borrowed hoodie that hung off her frame and sweatpants that she'd rolled up several times to keep from tripping over them. Somehow she still managed to look like royalty. "So," I said casually, "what's next for Her Majesty Queen Lyra Velnar?" She gave me a crooked smile. "Honestly, I was hoping to lie low for a day or two. Maybe catch up on Earth things. You know, minor rituals, like pizza consumption and arguing over who shot first in Star Wars." I snorted into my coffee mug. "You're going to blow someone's mind if you start quoting intergalactic law about preemptive strikes." She winked. "Only if they deserve it." For a few blessed hours, we actually managed to act like two normal friends reunited after years apart. We ordered an embarrassing amount of pizza, which Lyra attacked with the ruthless efficiency of someone who had survived on military rations for too long. She marveled at my ancient video game console, managing to defeat me in a match of Super Smash Bros. Using only 2 fingers, and what I strongly suspected was a slight manipulation of localized time fields. "You cheated," I accused, flopping onto the couch in defeat. "I innovated," she said primly, tossing her long silver hair over one shoulder. "Earthlings call it thinking outside the box." At one point, Lyra discovered the existence of cat videos and promptly fell into a 2-hour binge that involved a lot of undignified giggling and declarations that Earth's true dominant species was obviously the feline. "You realize," she said between fits of laughter, "that if the Galactic Council ever sees this, Earth will be classified as a protected wildlife sanctuary for cats." "I, for one, welcome our new cat overlords," I said, raising my mug in a solemn toast. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a bruised purple, the atmosphere shifted. Lyra grew quiet, her fingers idly tracing patterns on the couch cushion. I could see the weight of everything catching up to her. The exile, the battle for her identity, the collapse of the archive. I nudged her foot with mine. "Hey, you okay?" She gave me a small smile. "Just thinking about everything, about what I left behind." "You didn't leave it behind," I said gently. "You fought for it. You're still fighting." "Am I?" she murmured. "Sometimes it feels like I'm just running." "Maybe, Ann," I said. "But you're running towards something. That counts." She laughed softly, the sound a little shaky. "When did you get so wise?" "I watch a lot of movies," I said solemnly, "mostly ones with talking raccoons." That earned a genuine laugh, and I counted it as a small victory. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the first stars blink into existence above the city. Somewhere far off, a siren wailed half-heartedly, and the distant thrum of air traffic filled the night. Then Lyra stiffened. I followed her gaze and saw a small, hovering drone outside the window, sleek, black, and ominous, with a red light blinking like a heartbeat. Lyra sprang into action. She yanked the window open, grabbed a nearby pizza box, and, in one fluid, utterly absurd motion, flung it like a frisbee. The box smacked the drone with a satisfying thwack, sending it spiraling out of control before it exploded in a harmless shower of sparks and pepperoni slices. I gaped at her. "Did you just weaponize pizza?" "Improvised projectile weaponry," she said, dusting off her hands. "Level 2 combat training." I shook my head, laughing. "Remind me never to doubt your culinary skills again." Lyra's smile faded quickly. That was a scout. Vake might be down, but whoever was backing him, they're still out there. Can't we just move to Antarctica? I joked weakly. I hear the penguins are very welcoming. She didn't laugh this time. We need to find out who else is involved, she said grimly, before they find us. As if to punctuate her words, my doorbell buzzed. An insistent, unfriendly noise that immediately made my skin crawl. I exchanged a look with Lyra. No words needed. We both knew this wasn't the pizza guy. Plan, I whispered. She reached into her hoodie and pulled out another of those sleek silver rods, the kind that bent reality if you pointed them at the wrong angle. Smile nicely, she said, and stay behind me. I nodded, swallowing hard, and followed her to the door. Behind it, our next adventure, and probably more than a few terrible jokes, was already waiting. The door buzzed again, more urgently this time, like whoever was out there had a finger welded to the button. Lyra gave me a look that said, brace yourself, and adjusted the plasma rod casually over her shoulder. I peeked through the peephole, expecting a squad of armored mercenaries, maybe a walking tank or two, something appropriately dramatic. Instead, standing on my welcome mat was a very small, very nervous-looking creature that resembled a sentient pile of moss, dressed in a polyester suit 2 sizes too large. It waved a stubby tendril at the peephole and made a noise somewhere between a squeak and a yodel. I pulled back and blinked at Lyra. It's a plant? She frowned thoughtfully. Correction, a Mossari from the beetle quadrant. High-strung, easily flammable, and terrible at poker. Should we be worried? Only if it starts quoting legal codes, she muttered. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. The Mossari immediately thrust a holographic badge at me. It was upside down, but I could make out the words, Interquadrantal Claims and Disputes Office, before the badge flickered and dissolved into a faint smell of burnt cinnamon. Ahem, it squeaked, adjusting a pair of glasses that appeared to be balanced entirely on hope. Official notification of pending litigation against one Queen Lyra Velnar. Lyra groaned, pinching the bridge of her nose. Of course, Galactic lawyers. I blinked. You're being sued? Technically, Lyra said, I'm being petitioned for reparations due to reckless destabilization of transtemporal infrastructure. I turned back to the Mossari. Is that bad? The creature pulled out a datapad almost as big as itself and began scrolling through it. According to Statute 7B of the Multiversal Preservation Accord, subsection Delta, paragraph 42, yes. Lyra snatched the datapad and skimmed it rapidly. Her long ears twitched in frustration. They're blaming me for the memory core incident, she said, which is rich, considering Vike was the one who tried to erase reality. The Mossari wrung its leafy hands nervously. Nevertheless, as the surviving primary agent, you are held responsible. Standard procedure. Please don't incinerate me. Lyra sighed and crouched down so she was at eye level with the poor thing. What happens if I refuse? The Mossari looked horrified. Refusal triggers immediate arbitration. You would be forcibly summoned to the Grand Tribunal via the Emergency Extraction Protocol. Extraction, I repeated slowly. That sounds painful. Only if you resist, the Mossari chirped, sounding disturbingly cheerful about the whole thing. Lyra stood, rubbing her temples. Fine. We'll come peacefully. I assume we have some kind of grace period? 6 Earth hours, the Mossari said, consulting its datapad. After that, the tribunal will initiate aggressive retrieval measures. I didn't like the sound of that at all. Images of black-suited bureaucrats dragging Lyra away in a tractor beam danced through my head. We'll be ready, Lyra said, her voice grim. The Mossari beamed, or at least, I think it did. It was hard to tell with a face that mostly resembled a chia pet, and handed me a small cube. This is your tribunal beacon. It will activate when it's time. Thank you for your compliance and please rate your summons experience. It handed me a second cube that flashed with happy faces ranging from ecstatic to mildly resigned. I stared at the survey cube, utterly baffled, as the Mossari scurried away down the hallway at a speed that seemed impossible for someone without visible legs. Lyra closed the door with a heavy thud and leaned back against it. Well, I said after a long pause, on the bright side, at least they didn't send assassins. Yet, she said darkly. I tossed the survey cube onto the couch where it immediately began playing hold music, which somehow made the whole situation feel even more absurd. So what now? I asked. Lyra rubbed her hands together. We need a plan, a good one. Preferably one that doesn't involve incarceration, memory wipes, or being trapped in an endless loop of government paperwork. Any brilliant ideas? She grinned. One or two. But first we need help. From who? We already used up the sticky grenades. She strode over to my ancient laptop, the one I hadn't upgraded since high school, and started tapping furiously. I'm calling in a favor, she said. From where? Space Craigslist? She shot me a look. Close. An old friend. Slightly shady. Very good at making problems disappear. That's comforting, I muttered. What's their name? The laptop screen flickered, then lit up with a very enthusiastic logo that said, Intergalactic Solutions. No job too illegal. Complete with a bouncing animation of a smiling robot giving a thumbs up. Lyra tapped a few more keys, and moments later, a video call connected. The being on the other end was a tall, skeletal figure with translucent skin, wearing a Hawaiian shirt and sipping a fluorescent blue drink through a straw. Lyra! It bellowed in a voice that rattled the windows. You old chaos magnet! What black hole have you dragged yourself into this time? Hey, Zeke, Lyra said, grinning like a cat who'd found the cream in the laser pointer. Need a little help dodging intergalactic bureaucracy. Zeke's eyeless socket somehow managed to narrow in amusement. My favorite kind of client. I raised a hand awkwardly. Hi, I'm the human sidekick. Ah, Zeke said, bowing low enough to almost fall off his chair. The famous Terran. You poor, poor soul. Lyra explained the situation in rapid-fire terms, complete with dramatic hand gestures and occasional swearing in 3 languages I didn't understand. When she finished, Zeke whistled. You've really stirred the cosmic soup this time, kid. Can you help or not? Zeke leaned back, slurping noisily at his drink. I'll see what I can whip up. You're lucky. I've got a Chaos Pass still valid for another 2 cycles. Chaos Pass? I whispered. Lyra shrugged. Don't ask. Give me 2 hours, Zeke said, and maybe stock up on fire extinguishers. The call ended, and silence settled over the room. Lyra flopped onto the couch next to me, looking for all the world like someone settling in before a hurricane. Now we wait, she said, and pray, and maybe order more pizza, she added thoughtfully, because if we were about to get sucked into the bureaucratic equivalent of a black hole, we might as well face it on a full stomach. 2 hours and 3 large pizzas later, the tribunal beacon on my coffee table pulsed to life with an ominous bloop. A holographic countdown appeared above it, cheerfully announcing extraction in T-5 minutes, in letters that somehow managed to look both official and smug. Lyra stood up and adjusted her jacket, which had evolved from my old hoodie into something a bit more queenly, an iridescent coat woven from threads that shimmered like starlight. I had no idea where she'd gotten it. Probably the same mysterious space wardrobe where she kept her endless supply of plasma sticks and sarcasm. I was still in sweatpants. I briefly considered changing, then decided that if I was going to get kidnapped by a cosmic court system, I might as well be comfortable. Last chance to back out, Lyra said, smiling a little too brightly. I made a show of checking my imaginary watch. And missed the honor of being vaporized in bureaucratic hell? Never. Before she could reply, Zeke's voice boomed out of my rickety laptop speakers. Good news, Art, he said, startling me so badly I nearly dropped a slice of pizza. Your legal situation has been creatively reinterpreted. Define creatively, I said suspiciously. Simple, Zeke beamed. Instead of going to court, you're going to host a diplomatic summit on Earth, in your apartment, in approximately, he checked a chronometer embedded in his forehead, 3 minutes. Lyra's eyes widened. Zeke, you maniac, that's actually brilliant. I, on the other hand, felt an impending migraine setting in. Wait, in my apartment? I don't even have enough chairs. Zeke winked. Relax. Galactic diplomats love sitting on the floor. It's seen as a power move. Before I could argue, the beacon flashed brightly, and my living room was suddenly very, very crowded. In one corner, a gelatinous ambassador from the Blur Empire sloshed into existence, burbling contentedly. A delegation of crystalline beings materialized next, humming at different frequencies like a choir warming up. Somewhere near the kitchen, a sentient cloud attempted to handshake my toaster, and smack in the middle of it all, perched on my coffee table with regal poise, was Lyra. The Galactic Tribunal's holographic emissary flickered into being above us, looking vaguely like a judge, a school principal, and a disappointed grandmother all rolled into one. "Proceed," it intoned. Lyra stood, her voice calm but commanding. "Esteemed beings of the Galactic Tribunal and assorted sapient life forms currently rearranging the molecular structure of my friend's furniture, I propose a solution to the dispute against me." Several ambassadors murmured among themselves, one of the crystals clinking excitedly. Lyra continued, "Rather than endless litigation, I suggest establishing a shared cultural exchange program between Earth and Althera. Mutual learning, mutual benefit, pizza provided." There was a pause. Then the gelatinous ambassador burbled something approving and produced a mini pizza slice from within its depths. A crystalline being harmonized a happy chord. The holographic judge looked vaguely alarmed. Is this a bribe?" "Think of it as a diplomatic offering," Lyra said smoothly. "A foundation of peace, layered with cheese." The cloud being let out a puff that sounded suspiciously like applause. To my utter amazement, the judge flickered for a moment, consulted some invisible data scrolls, and finally said, "Proposal accepted. Queen Lyra Velnar is hereby absolved of charges pending successful operation of the Earth-Altheran Cultural Initiative." The hologram vanished with a cheerful ping, leaving behind only the faint scent of burnt nutmeg. I slumped onto the couch, stunned. We won?" Lyra grinned, flopping down beside me. "We won." The diplomats, apparently eager to begin the exchange program immediately, started exploring my apartment with alarming enthusiasm. The gelatinous ambassador absorbed my TV remote. The crystalline beings began stacking my books into complex geometric patterns. The cloud being somehow got into my fridge. I turned to Lyra, laughing helplessly. "My security deposit is so gone." She laughed too, and for the first time since she'd arrived, it sounded free, unburdened. As the night wore on, and my home transformed into the galaxy's weirdest embassy, I realized something important. I had changed. I wasn't just the clueless Earth guy bumbling through galactic intrigue anymore. I had helped a queen dodge cosmic red tape, weaponized pizza, negotiated with space lawyers, and survived an alien cultural exchange. Sure, my couch was probably radioactive now, but I had grown. Stronger, braver, a little more ridiculous, but in the best way. Lyra, too, seemed lighter, more herself, no longer just a queen or a fugitive, but my friend, the same stubborn, brilliant, mischievous girl I'd built tree forts with all those years ago. And now she was building something even bigger, a bridge between worlds. Eventually, the diplomats tired themselves out and drifted off into whatever cosmic portals they arrived through, leaving behind only minor property damage and a fridge suspiciously full of glowing fruit. Lyra stood by the window, looking out over the city lights. "What's next for you?" I asked, joining her. She smiled, the kind that promised trouble and adventure in equal measure. "Oh, I have plans, big ones. But maybe I'll stay here a little longer first. Help you teach aliens how to properly eat tacos without causing interdimensional incidents." "You're a true humanitarian," I said solemnly. She bumped her shoulder against mine. "And you're not bad for a Terran." We stood there in companionable silence, two unlikely friends at the edge of a new universe. Whatever came next, tribunal threats, pizza diplomacy, galactic mischief, we were ready. After all, once you've hosted a diplomatic summit in your living room and survived, what could possibly scare you? Besides, I was pretty sure if things ever got truly bad again, we still had one emergency pizza box left.